Hey everybody, I hope that you are doing well and that you are safe. This week we are jumping ahead in Kansas history to the Progressive Era, which is an important part not just only of Kansas history, but also U.S. history as well. This video shouldn't be too long, not as long as the others, not too much to talk about, but hopefully it'll be some stuff to give you some insight and help you to understand a little bit more, not only about the history of Kansas, but the history of the U.S. as well. Okay, so let's just get moving right along. So when we talk about the Progressive Era, we're talking about this time period in Kansas and American history from 1890 to 1920. And so what was it all about? What was the Progressive period about? And what people wanted during this time is that they wanted to make society better. And when I say make society better, it just wasn't about things that might benefit certain groups of people, whether they are working class people or rich people or young people or old people. But some of these things were things that benefited all people, that were a benefit to make society better for everyone. And so that's really, really important to remember that when we talk about the Progressive Era, that these were things that impacted a huge group of people. Okay. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at three different aspects of the Progressive Era and things that happen relative to Kansas. So the first one we're going to look at is this whole movement to protect kids. Now you have to remember this is more than 130 years ago, 120 years ago. And if you were a child, most kids went to work full time between the ages of 10 and 12. So all of you would be working full time. All kids went to work. Um, Here is a picture of some kids. This is south or close to Wichita, and they're working in an oil field. So their whole job, and you can see like this kid doesn't even have shoes, and this is all oil, is what they would do is they were in charge of taking like this mud or oil-soaked mud and trying to get as much oil out of that mud. And that's what they did. They worked anywhere, typically not like 8 to 10, but they worked during the daylight hours, so whatever those hours were. And that money they raised, the money that they got, it wasn't money that went to like them. Like they weren't saving up money to buy a PS4 or to buy, Robux or anything like that. This money went directly to their parents to help pay for things that the family needed. Okay. So that's one thing to remember is that they're working and doing this work to help their family because their family depended upon them and relied upon them. Now, because these kids are working, what does that mean in terms of school? And so what that means is that all kids between the ages of 8 and 14, you only needed to go to school for you only needed to go to school for 12 weeks out of a year. So let me repeat that. So if you're between the ages of 8 and 14, you only needed to go to 12 weeks of school a year. So that was approximately about 60 days. Now, these rules weren't really enforced. And to add to that, it's not that you went for just 60 days straight and that was it. No, you might go to like one day of school and then 3 weeks later you would go to another day of school. And it wouldn't even be a full day. You might go for like 2, 3, or 4 hours. Additionally, if you go to a church, you know that during or before your church services, you would go to something called Sunday school. And those schools were created as ways to teach people how to read and write, particularly the Bible. And in some cases, those were counted as days towards your schooling as well. And so there weren't really a lot of laws that would really help kids get an education. More importantly, kids worked in a lot of very dangerous jobs in factories. Kids would get what would called maimed, where they would lose certain limbs, or they would have an eye knocked out, or they would lose like part of their foot. Um, and so even before these kids started life, a lot of them were really injured. And so what happens here in Kansas is in 1905, we passed what is called the Child Labor Law. And this is the first of many laws that are passed to protect kids. And so this particular law said that if you were under the age of 14, that you couldn't work in any factories or you couldn't work in other harmful jobs like mines, you couldn't work with really dangerous things. And so these laws were designed to protect kids. Now, later on, there's going to be other laws that say, well, if you're under this, and we talked about this earlier in this year when we talked about what kind of jobs you could get when we practiced the application. We talked about these things. And so there are a lot of jobs that kids couldn't have, even today. Okay. So life for kids today is very different than what it was like for kids 120 years ago. And it's really important. I think this is for the betterment. The next thing we need to talk about is public health. And when we talk about public health, we're talking about a lot of things. Everything's from food to clean water to medical care. And these were all things that were designed to keep people healthy and stop preventing diseases. And at this time, we're learning a lot about how diseases spread, what we need to do. And the first of these deals with food. And during this time in Kansas and the US, there are a lot of laws that are passed about how food can be prepared, but also having clean surfaces and clean areas to provide and serve food. So we are not going to get to talk about this, but if you've ever been kind of back east, and they have these in Chicago and St. Louis, but there's a restaurant called White Castle, and they have these little like slider hamburgers. Well, that started in Wichita, and the reason why it was called White Castle is everything was white inside to show how clean and safe everything was. And so laws are going to be passed saying that, hey, you have to have clean surfaces. You have to have meat prepared a certain way. You can't just serve it. Additionally, there's going to be laws and things worked upon to make sure that people have access to clean water. That things like what we call wastewater is basically like stuff for, pee and poop and all that stuff, is not thrown into clean water sources, but that we properly dispose of it because diseases can spread through having unclean water. And then more importantly, other things when we talk about medical care. So doctors are going to be required to wear masks. They're going to be required to not use the same needles over and over again or same tools, okay? And more importantly, there's going to be an effort to educate people about not like doing things like spitting, coughing, or sneezing because this spreads things like the flu or tuberculosis and other diseases. So there are also these public campaigns to get people to stop doing these things. One of the things that you're going to learn is if you choose is you're going to learn about something called the public cup. So before drinking fountains, there would be kind of like a cooler, like one of those big Gatorade coolers, and everybody would have a one cup that they would drink out of, which really spread diseases, and that's something that they're going to get rid of. So public health, there's this effort to really pass laws and to do things to help people so that they can stay healthy. And again, these are things that are not just going to benefit poor people or rich people, they benefit everybody. Men, women, children, rich, poor, everybody. Okay, and the last thing we're going to talk about is the women's suffrage movement. Now, when we say suffrage, people think that it means suffer, but really what suffrage means is equal rights. And so, women's suffrage is talking about women having equal rights with men. Okay. Now, first of all, women's suffrage had been a long fight in the U.S., dating way back to the Civil War period and even before that. Okay. And so we have to remember that women have been fighting for a long time to have equal rights. And not just like equal rights in terms of that, but the right to vote, the right to be able to own property, and a lot of other things. Okay. In 1912, Kansas passes what's called the Equal Suffrage Amendment. And we are going to be the 7th state in the U.S. to give women the right to vote. Now, even though we gave women the right to vote in 1912, this means that they can only vote in local and state elections. So they could vote for things like governor, they could vote for things like mayor, but they still cannot vote for president or for congressmen or for United States senators because those are federally elected positions. And so women finally get the right to vote in Kansas 1912, and they start to have some of these equal rights that men had. And we are the seventh state to do that. A lot of people think that Kansas were very conservative and maybe we didn't do that, but we were actually very progressive in some of the things that we did. Okay, so that's all that I have to share about as far as the progressive era and just giving you information about things that we need to do. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the assignments that you're going to do this week. So the first assignment you're going to do is that it's going to be on the progressive era. And what is going to happen is there are going to be 5 PDFs on 5 different people. So here's just a screenshot of one of the PDFs, okay, on Charles Sheldon, who was a prominent religious leader, and he is the guy that came up with the What Would Jesus Do slogan. And so what you're going to do is there's going to be 5. You need to choose 2 of them. So you're going to choose 2 from the 5. So you could look at the 5 people. There's one on like racism, equal rights for women, health reform, and you're just going to choose 2 that you think are the most interesting. You're going to read the PDFs, and they should be 2 pages, or 2 pages. And then there's going to be 3 questions you're going to answer for each one. So altogether, there's 6 questions, but you're going to answer the same 3 questions on 2 people. Now, there's not going to be any primary source. This is all secondary source. So what you're going to need to do is you don't need to quote it, but you need to use the WRAP strategy, okay? So restate, answer, provide evidence and details, okay? So you got to remember, this is a secondary source. You're not going to quote it. You only quote for a primary source. And this should be very simple. It should be very easy. Shouldn't be too much difficulty. Maybe just in choosing what you need to do, or, which person you would like to do. Okay. And then the second thing is your COVID-19 pandemic journal, the 5th entry. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to write about what is your average day like. So I know, like me, like I pretty much almost have a set routine where it's like, this is what I do here and then. So talk about what is your average day life? What gets you excited? What are the negatives? What are the positives? Is there something that you do that's like pretty consistent and the same every day? Okay. So again, make sure you write this in your main journal entry that you're going to submit on the last week, and then copy and paste that and then attach it to the Google Doc that's in there. Or not attach, but paste it into the Google Doc that's there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you're putting effort and you're reading the directions. I know that this week I sent out a lot of emails, people who did not do the assignments correctly, and they need to do them. Remember, this is a way for you to improve your grade. And if you have questions, please feel free to email me and let me know how I can help you, okay? Again, if you have questions, email me. I hope that you're doing well. I know it'll be this week when you see this video, stores should be opening up, restaurants should be opening up. So hopefully we're getting back to normal life as it is. I hope you guys know I love you. Hope everything's going well. And I hope that you are all safe and healthy. Have a good day. Bye.